And we're back. So next up we have Jeff Conniff, who is our resident visual design and interaction design guru, come engineer, walking us through some of the CSS-related changes that we have in store, and followed by Tilo Mitra, one of our newest team members, who is a former intern, as Dave mentioned, talking about some of the exciting, again, CSS-related projects that he's working on.
Thank you, Jenny. Thanks. Thank you. I'm glad to be here today and get an opportunity to talk about skinning. And I've been asked to give a brief bio just at the beginning. And I would like to mention that my lifelong quest for all things visual and beautiful started very early in my life. My mother was an artist, and she prompted me. Got my very first opportunity to exhibit a huge, full-scale, full-color mural. It was beautiful. Unfortunately, it was on the wall of my hallway to my parents' room. It was called Exploration in Crayola on Latex Enamel. I learned one thing very early on, and that there are critics everywhere. And it was demanded that I scrub off every one of those brilliant strokes. So even though I was probably damaged psychologically, I still went on to get a degree in graphic design and have spent 15 plus years, I think that's the right euphemism, 15 plus years, doing visual design, interaction design, and prototyping, and found myself on the YUI team. I'm the author of the dial widget and the night skin, and lots of fun library examples that you may have seen. And right now, currently working on skinning with some really brilliant and fun people to work with. I'd like to mention Matt Sweeney. Do you want to wave your hand back there, Matt? The great Matt Sweeney. And Anthony Pipkin, is he here? Yep, there's Anthony over there. Great guys. Having a lot of fun. In the animal kingdom, it's a very critical skill to be able to blend into one's background. So that's critical for two reasons. These critters need to be able to blend in and hunt well so that they can eat. That's critical. They also need to, for the second reason, they need to be able to hide well so that they're not eaten. So those two things. So it's similar in UI skinning, but it's also a little bit different. It's not so much a eat or be eaten proposal, but you really need to blend in and look like you belong so that you don't have these sore thumb effect happening when you're putting a widget into a UI. Fortunately, in YUI, we've got this great utility or this great system for skinning the appearance of things, pages and our widgets. So it goes something like this. It's very easy. Just in the body tag, or anywhere else, other DOM element, you can put in a skin with the skin, a class name with the skin there. And then in this case, you don't need it because Sam's skin is the default, but in other cases, you can put in a filter that has that same matching name. And that's all it takes to get the skins and interchange them. So we have two skins today. One is called the Sam skin, which works great for light backgrounds, and the other one, named for obvious reasons, the night skin. So we have those two skins today. The only problem with that is that if you are working in some kind of application or web page that looks like this, and you want to put, say, a tab view control in that open spot to the left of the cinnamon roll, and so you drop that in, you know, the colors don't quite cut it. They're not just right. So what are you going to do? Well, you'll have to do some tweaking on that. And it becomes really apparent to us that we need a lot more skins. So what are we going to do to get a lot more skins? Well, the process, unfortunately, is a little bit tedious. You have to understand a lot about each of the widgets, or at least the widget that you're going to put in your app. You need to look at the CSS and understand where the classes go and where they fall in the different DOM objects. You need to connect all the dots and put the right values in the right place to make them look correct for what you're doing. Now that's great for one widget, but if you're trying to do a skin for the entire library of all of our widgets, that's a bigger job. You're really doing similar work times n widgets. And it also helps to have some experience with visual things and color, and to have spent some time doing some of that is a helpful thing. Now, even with that and the patience required to do that, it's still a little bit like the process of manually creating the inner works of a wristwatch, one at a time. It's a lot of work. So we tried to figure out what we were going to do about that. And we looked around at some other people who were trying to solve the same problem and saw a couple of solutions out there. One of which is a solution where you look at every individual possible stylable element in your user interface, and you give it a very explicit variable name. And then you provide an input field for whoever is going to do this skin, for them to enter in their own hex value or their font or their size of padding or whatever it is. And so you've got just a lot of input fields and a lot of variables. And you can imagine that each time you add something to that space, it just gets longer and longer. So it becomes kind of unwieldy, as you can see. So that doesn't really, that may share the work of producing skins, but it doesn't necessarily make it a lot easier. Now, an obvious answer to that would be to group the variables together and have multiple things point to the same variable, so you don't have quite so many buckets to deal with, quite so many inputs to fill in the values for. So we saw some of those, and you can imagine that you might come up with some names for UI groups of things that could be commonly shared, like title or header, and you could color them this way. But you might find that there are some things that might be a little surprising. It might be somewhat expected that you'd see that color for title and header behind a tab view. But on the other hand, you might be surprised when you find out that that same color is also being shared by the range between thumbs and a slider. Or maybe even more surprised to find out that that same color is being used by a progress bar while you're waiting for something to load. So you're having some problems with unexpected consequences from combining those things together. Another example, you might think a good generic value to select or set variable would be for something called clickable. We use a general name. And so you'd say, great, I'll color my buttons dominant because they need to be seen a lot. So I'll give them this color. I might not realize that spin controls will also have that dominant color on those buttons. And I might not realize that the sliders are also, the thumbs on sliders are going to have that same dominant color. You might have expected that, but you might not. Now, what you might really not expect is that every day in a calendar, since it's clickable, guess what? Gets the same dominant color. Really an unexpected consequence. So in some of these systems, you can select and change every single little piece, and it's just a lot of work. And that doesn't assure that you get what you want. That reminds me of a story about work. There once was a neighbor down the street. His name was Bob. And Bob lived in a nice home with his wife, Sally. Sally was always after Bob, saying, "Bob, I think it's time that you painted the house. Bob, when are we going to paint the house? Bob, we haven't painted the house in 12 years. So Bob finally decided that while Sally was going back east to visit family for a couple of weeks, he'd surprise her and he'd paint the house. So while she was gone, that's what he did. He got all the little chips. And fortunately, Bob doesn't live in an area where there's a homeowners association, so he really had total freedom to do whatever he wanted. He could pick any color, which was great news for Bob because he really loves color. And so he's got a house that has a lot of individual pieces that he's got to decide exactly the relationships of these colors. So he got to work and planned it all out. And he did paint the house while Sally was gone. And on her return, Sally was indeed surprised to see that Bob had painted the house. So just the fact that Bob had the ability to paint every single piece any way he wanted to didn't mean that he was going to get the good relationships and get a good paint job. And Sally would agree that too. So that brings me to another issue. Just like in UI, this is a problem. There's another principle that I've called the whack-a-mole principle. And you all know the game. The mole pops up and you hammer him down, and as soon as you hammer him down, he pops up somewhere else, and you hammer him down, and it goes over and over and seems endless that you're trying to get this thing to stay down. Well, the same can be true when you're picking colors and setting things together. And let me show you that. To demonstrate that pain point, I'd like to use my acupuncture diagram. So this is a simple example of a widget, just a menu. And it's sitting on a white background. And say you were going to change this because you realized that you needed something that was going to be on a green background, and it just didn't look quite right. So you'd think, well, I'll just make it green, no big deal. Maybe you've thought this. But once you got into it, you realized that, well, I need to change this body of the bottom part to something green. And if I do that, then this highlighted section doesn't look good. So I need to change that. And by the way, this blue text on the green background doesn't look very good, so I'll need to change that. And by the way, the border doesn't look very good, so I'll need to change that to green, maybe a little darker. And this top tab really needs some work too. It can't stay blue. And then its text, of course, can't be blue. It needs to be green. And the border also has to be green. And we haven't even gotten into the hover problems. There's hover and a lot of other colors that have to be selected. And then, then you step back and you look at it, and this is the whack-a-mole part. You say, well, that's good, except I think the body needs to be a little darker in that menu. And so as soon as you change the body color to be something a little darker, then the text is not readable. So then you have to go back and do the text. And I think this conference only goes for a couple days, so I probably can't really show the full effect of whack-a-mole, but that gives you an idea. So this is what we did, or actually, to be more accurate, what we're doing. We started with 2 skins, like I mentioned, and we did a little research, and we decided that we would probably need a number of skins that would be pretty close to the number of unique visual color schemes and designs of apps and web pages on the internet. So we did some calculations and did some research and found that we'd need about 29 million. Okay, question?
How did you get this number?
The question is, how did I get that number? Well, we actually employed some of the same research methods that politicians use frequently. I got that off my RSA token, but you can use any random number generator for that. And it seemed plausible, so I put it in. Thought you'd be fooled by it, but I guess not. So at any rate, we need a lot. And unfortunately, people who have the time and the patience and some of the skills to put these together is a relatively small number. And so it's going to take a long time to get to 29 million skins. So what we had to do is figure out a way to eliminate a lot of those special skills and a lot of the tedium. And that's exactly what we've done and are doing. So we needed to make this easy. How easy do we need to make it? Well, we need to make it easy enough so that just about anyone can create a skin or their own skin whenever they need to in a short amount of time. So how to do that? Well, we looked around and the other solutions that we're seeing didn't seem to be the way we wanted to go, and we had a different idea. So we're proceeding with that in a different direction. So from our experience in working with color and design, we've learned that colors are a lot like people. And you can really group all people in the world into 3 categories. Everyone knew that, right? 3 main categories. There are the ones that seem to always need attention. They always have to be in the limelight. They always have to be out there, and people have to be looking at them. And then there's the other group that's not quite so in your face. You know they're important and they have a purpose, but they're not always out there shouting. And then there's a third category that seem to fade into the background, and you don't really even know they're there, but they're still necessary. So the same is true of colors and UI elements. So to give an example of that, I put together a test, and don't worry, this is not graded, but we'll all be taking this test together. You don't have to hand in your papers or put your names on them. In fact, this test is made ridiculously easy just to make a point. So I'm going to show you five blocks of color, ranging in emphasis from most emphasized to least emphasized, and see if you can pick out which one is which. So grade them from really dominant to really recessive. Do you need more time? Did I make this too easy by stacking them from brightest to darkest? Maybe I did, okay. All right, so that's throwing it off. I'll mix them up a little bit. What do you think? Need more time? Maybe I made it too easy because they're all blues. Maybe if I mixed in some other hues in there, it would be more difficult. So we'll see. What do you think? Pretty tough? No? Got it? Pretty easy to do. Well, it's really relationships of colors and which ones are emphasized and which ones are not. So you can take this kind of process and apply it to text elements as well, or objects on a widget or in a UI. And that's what we've done, is to create, instead of buckets of UI named things to attach skins to, we've created a hierarchy of emphasized color values, and then we point the widgets at those generic values. So let me demonstrate that. So you'll see something that looks kind of similar to what we saw in the test. We've got some boxes there. They're labeled, but they're going from most emphasized item to least. Don't be fooled by the fact that the least emphasized one is a wrapper for the others. So what can you do with this? You can select the key color. In other words, you don't have to change all of the color blocks. Just pick a key color, let's say green, and you automatically get colors of green that are in different emphasis. And really, all you're doing is picking one color. Want red? Got the same thing. Want a dull red? A dull dark red? So it's as easy as using a color picker. You're establishing this relationship of colors and color buckets. Now, they're not just 4 colors to choose from, but we've really got a whole full fleshed out set of text of different weights and gradients and rules and borders in the system. And so selecting anything in there changes everything just at a single click. So the second thing that you can do to change this scheme of emphasis is pick a color scheme. And a color scheme is really nothing more than how those main blocks of color bucket relate to one another. So right now we're looking at monochrome. But if you really wanted just a single color as your highest emphasized color and the rest gray, you could pick the color plus gray color scheme. And then the same thing happens wherever you go. If you wanted a complementary color scheme, you can do that too. So you pick green and you get the complementary color of that. If you want a dark background, and the last choice down there, N more, means there can be infinite number of color schemes. We're obviously going to start with more than just the 4 or 5, but you can see very quickly that if you have, say, 16 million colors in that color picker, and you throw half of them away, and you multiply that by even 4, you're at 29 million possibilities right there. So let's go back. And whenever you're trying to take something visual and aesthetic and you're trying to create it by math, you run into some thorny problems because 1 and 2 don't always equal 3 when you're dealing with things like color. So there are some problems that we run into. And fortunately, Tony Pipkin, if you can stand up again, Tony, or wave or something, Tony, he's my superhero. I had cobbled together some code that was sort of doing this, but Tony came in and rewrote some great methods that are now part of the library. They're y.color, and he's got some great things in there that take care of these thorny problems. And I'll let you applaud after you've seen some of those. Let me show you some of those. First is readability. As you can imagine, anytime you're changing background colors, you're going to quickly have problems with readability of text sitting on top of it. For example, this slider changes only the background color. And you can see if you start doing that, you're going to get into some things that are pretty hard to read real fast. But fortunately, thanks to Tony and y.color, we've got get offset, which really just takes a background color, which is the background hex color there, and an offset lightness value. It could also be offset saturation or hue. And in this case, it's 20% brighter. And now anywhere I move the slider, you can see that the text is readable, which is pretty nice, except when you start getting toward the top, right? And for that situation, we've got just another minor piece of code that flips that 20, the sign of 20, so that it stays readable no matter where you move. So that's get offset in Y-color, which was really nice for me to use in this. So the next thorny problem is introduced by this humble gray rectangle who has no color at all. He has no hue. I'm sorry, he does have hue, but you won't know it because it has saturation of 0. So he's plain. He's only 50% brightness. I mean, if he were 100, he'd be white. If he was 0, he'd be black. So he's pretty boring. But a much more festive rectangle is this one. It has all of the hues from left to right. They're all 100% saturated. And they all have, make special note that they all have the exact same lightness value of 50%. Now, if you squint your eyes and look at that bottom thing, you'll see that, you might see that some of them seem to not be 50%. Some of them seem to be a little darker. In fact, if you take that color band and you turn it into a grayscale image in Photoshop, you get something like this, which makes it really obvious that some of those colors are not appearing to the eyeball to be the same brightness. So why does that matter? Why am I talking about this? Well, if you took two colors out of the color spectrum, and say you wanted to use those two colors in a widget somehow, and you had two objects that you wanted to have sitting next to each other, and you wanted to have this system that can change hues to anything the user wants, but you want those two elements to keep the same relative dominance. When you ran into a combination like yellow and blue, one is going to scream and the other is going to be quiet. So that's a problem of brightness. Fortunately, we have another thing from YColor, which is called get brightness. So this is no get brightness method happening now, but you can see as I choose different colors that the comparative lightness between the purple on the left and, say, the blue on the right is very different. But in YColor now there's get similar brightness. So now when I pick a green, and you can see that it gets input on the first argument, and I tell it to match the lightness of the color on the left, that I get a different value for green that's equal in brightness. So you can kind of see how this works out. So as we pick different colors around here, for the most part, monitors, you can see that we're maintaining the brightness. Also in YColor is a harmony utility, which in this case gives us get complementary color. So now when I select, say, green, for instance, it's the color on the right. It's going to give me the complement of green, which is red. And then we use get similar brightness to take that red color and say, give us a red that's the same lightness as green, and we get this result here. So if I pick red, then it takes red and gives me green, and then tones down the green so that it matches the brightness of red. So these are really nice utilities, and I really appreciate Tony's work on that. So let's give him a round of applause. So those thorny issues are no longer thorny. And if you'd like to look at YColor, that's a link to it if you get this presentation. So now that I have the ability to work in that color space and have confidence that I'm going to get these benefits from YColor, I can get widgets that are hooked up to that color space in intelligent ways. So every element in the widget can then point to its right level of emphasis. And then no matter where I drive the colors, that emphasis is kept. So let me demonstrate that. So if we look for a green, one click, and we've got a green monochrome scheme. Pick a different color scheme, maybe complementary, and we have a green and red color scheme. Pick something over here. Saturated, low saturated, anywhere you go. And you can see that these widgets are all behaving the way you'd expect color-wise. And these are real widgets, by the way. This is not smoke and mirrors. This is the real stuff. And we've got hover colors also taken care of. I didn't have to set any of those at all. So all the widgets are now hooked up to this extended color space that looks like that. And it all behaves well. We're also doing a little experimenting with border radius. So if you watch the radius on the buttons, and also padding. So these things are very easy to manipulate without having to dig in and set individual variables everywhere. So that's how we're doing that. And since you're here, you fit the demographic of people who the first thing you do when you get a new pen is what? Take it apart, right? So let me show you a little bit about how the color space is connected up to the widgets. I should remember to mention that you only have to do this once, and we'll be doing this before it's even out there. So this that I'm about to show you is not something that has to be done every time you do a skin. It really is just as easy as picking a color scheme and a color. So this is under the hood. Let's start with a single individual element. Let's take the text on a highlighted tab of a tab view widget. So where does that come from? That comes, of course, from the CSS. But how did that hex value get there? Well, that came because there was a variable that was replaced in a template. And that variable came from a mapping file where that variable is mapped to the correctly emphasized place in that color space that we looked at. And that space.block.highest.text.normal is a location in a JSON object, an element in a JSON object that represents the entire color space. So you have space.block.highest.text.normal. And that's where the hex value is. Now, how did that hex value get there? Well, this whole color space JSON object is represented in the UI that we've been looking at. It's just the visualization of the color space. And so that element for that particular string of text came when we clicked on the bucket for the highest key color and we chose a color from the color picker. And then smart calculations happened and we got all of the color space filled out with all of its values. So that's how it's put together. So in summary, we should avoid the hard work. We should avoid defining everything and the whack-a-mole pain. We've taken a different approach. This is relative levels of emphasis. CSS variables to point to this color space. And again, this is one-time work that we're taking care of. Under the hood, it's y.color. And really all you'll have to do is pick a key color and a color scheme, and you'll have millions of possible skins. So, thank you. I think we have a microphone coming for you.
Hi. So how is the impact of this dynamic mechanism effect on the performance?
Actually, all of what you've seen will be put in place just to generate a skin. And then that skin will be used the same way skins are today. So you'll just reference that and it will automatically load the CSS file for those. So really performance is none.
Okay,
No
second
performance
question,
hit
is
at
this
all.
used any like less?
Actually, it can use anything to substitute the value in that mapping file. And we're going to be publishing this and getting feedback to find out exactly what the right system is for that.
Thank you.
Hello? Oh, sorry. So do you feel like the automation of this constricts your ability to maybe fine-tune some of the details on something, and how, I mean, what are sort of the drawbacks to that?
No, actually, because you can pick any color to start with as a key color, and you can we'll be making it so that you can create your own color scheme, which is the relationships of those 4 blocks. You have a lot of flexibility. And then, at the end of the day, this is just generating a CSS file that today you would have to go in and edit anyway. So, we're not restricting that point. And then later on, we can probably add the ability to, tweak individual things. And Matt, speak up if you want to add anything to what I'm saying. Okay.
Just curious what sort of timeline you're looking at for like when this will be included in the public release and all that?
Yeah, actually, what you saw today was working code. We're going to polish that up just a little bit and make the tool that I have there that I showed available so that you can create skins sometime in the near future. And then we're going to properly format the code and put it actually as part of the library. Did you want to add anything on that, Matt?
Yeah, the longer-term strategy is to incorporate it into the build process and stuff. The shorter term is get the skin generator out there so people can create style sheets and contribute those.
Yeah, and so we can get feedback on that as well. Great.
So just to be clear, that if you're writing a gallery module, say, then before too long you'll write a CSS template that will refer to that color space rather than
Right.
CSS.
Right. Mhm.
And thank you
Once.
from the
Oh.
bottom of my heart.
You're welcome. And that'll be once, you only have to do that one time.
Any more questions?
I got you.
Hi, do you have any concept of like a lightness or darkness thresholds where certain elements gain or lose styling? For example, a drop shadow may look good in a medium brightness skin, but maybe on a light skin it might not look quite so right. Do you have anything like that in your skin builder?
Yeah, a lot of the, are you asking specifically about drop shadows or any color element?
It would be any color element or thickness of borders or things like that.
Yeah, we're looking at thickness of border too, and so we'll be anxious to hear community feedback on thickness of border. There is a lot of code in there that handles the relationships between all of those colors and makes sure that they don't fall off the radar and you can't see this part. So yes, we're handling it, and there's a lot of really good stuff in YColor that's helping us write smart code for that.
Hi. I'm wondering how you handle spacing between buttons over here. If you thought about automatically calculating the proper spacing between buttons, I find that we have several modals in our application, or other elements on the page. We don't have a consistent way of easily padding between different objects. So are you guys thinking of that too?
That's good input, and I'll make sure that we think about that, get that in there. We have been working on padding within widgets, within objects, and that's good input. We'll take that as padding between objects. Good. I need margins between objects.
Over here.
Yeah.
Would it be possible to generate your own color combinations? Like, say when it generates the CSS, like you can, like you had the opposite colors and stuff like that. So like you generate your own kind of library that will generate the CSS for you.
Not sure I understand. Did you mean a different color scheme?
Yeah, if you have like the complementary colors,
Right.
maybe you can create your own that will generate the CSS for you. Like you can modify the existing library. So
Right, the whole color scheme picker that I had, the radio buttons on the top left, were choices between how the individual major blocks of color relate to each other. And you saw complementary in there and monochrome and color plus gray. It's wide open. And we're using all of the Y.color utilities for that. So you could have triads, you could have split chromatic things, so anything is open to that. And the YColor has a whole full library of ways that you can get different color schemes that can be part of that. Thanks, good question.
Hi. Using Slider as the example for my question, Slider today has several skins which work really, really well, but it's awkward to have like one theme and select a couple of slider styles for that.
Yeah.
So any thoughts on, some widgets you just kind of have one theme and that's it. But some widgets like Slider and buttons are candidates for having within one theme like different styles per se. So just any thoughts on just making that easy so that it's you don't have to, you choose the skin and the different styles of a component are part of it rather than choosing like a style per component
Yeah.
or a scheme per component.
Yeah, the sliders are a little tougher nut to crack because right now they're image-based. So we're thinking on that one, but I don't have a good answer for you today.
Thank you.
Yep.
Over here.
Yeah.
What about the accessibility sort of colors? Will that also be taken care in the options?
Can you say that again?
Accessibility colors like yeah, like colorblind and stuff like that for people.
Accessibility, color blindness issues, yeah. That will be the responsibility of the person who is picking the key color and picking the color scheme to make sure, or building your own color scheme, which is, again, is just about this many lines to say how those blocks relate to each other. And then you can totally control which colors appear, which hues appear in the color scheme.
Okay.
So maybe that's a good point. Maybe we should offer a couple of color schemes specifically designed at visual accessibility. Great, thank you.
I have another question.
Yeah.
What about if there is a situation where I want the colors to dynamically change on users in a choice? Like, I want to give a application that the user can change the color scheme dynamically, some sort of a design UI based of something like that, which is not like a CSS file based something, but it's all in memory sort of. So will this help in that situation also?
Dynamically changing color schemes is probably going to go over my head. I'm good. What's that?
Can we get a mic on him, please?
Yeah, can Matt have a mic?
It sounded like you were asking for something like the tool that Jeff demonstrated.
I think he means in real time at an end user wants to do something with an application that will change the color scheme real time.
Unless I'm missing it, I guess I would imagine you would build something almost exactly like what you demonstrated there, which was skinning the widgets on the fly.
Yeah. Okay.
We have one question over here.
I had the exact same question. So the application that we work on has the capability of user choosing themes, which are nothing but style sheets. So I would probably think that it'll be useful for us to have like a generator where I can pick and it can build the style sheets for me using y.color.
Yeah,
I
actually,
think that question is related probably.
that's exactly what you saw today. Is it's going to be a tool, and you'll be able to do that. Press a button and get a style sheet.
Awesome,
So you
thanks.
can just keep pressing the button and keep making style sheets, and then you'll have them.
Okay, thanks.
I think we should cut off the Q&A now and give some time to Tilo for his presentation. Thank you very much. Those are good questions.
Nice job.
Hey everyone. So I want to thank Jeff. That was a really nice presentation. I just want to take a little bit of time to give you a really quick look at something that I've been working on for a few weeks after I joined YUI, which is responsive grids. How many people here have used YUI Grids at some point? Okay. How many of you guys are actually using it now in like a project or something? Okay, that's pretty good. So yeah, I've used YUI Grids before, obviously, and I really liked it. But I felt it was always missing responsive grids. Just out of curiosity, how many of you guys who are using YUI Grids have some responsive behavior built into that grid? Okay, a lot less hands. So I wanted to show you something that I was working on related to solve this problem. So I've made a version of YUI Grids, and this is just an example, and I'll get to, well, let me first talk about the issue here. So there are a lot of responsive grids out there, Bootstrap, Zurb, and there are a whole bunch more. And I took a step back and thought about the issue, and Matt actually helped me a lot with this. I feel that for a lot of responsive grids out there, they kind of force a lot of things down your throat. So let's take Bootstrap as an example. The Bootstrap grid is a 12-column grid layout. And if you want it to be responsive, it has certain media queries that it fields are right. So usually it's 480 pixels and below for phones. It has a tablet media query level, usually 768 pixels to 1024s for the iPad. And then it has a large desktop media query. Well, now you have the Nexus 7 out, we have the iPad minis out, and some of those lines are getting more and more blurry. So that's one issue. The other issue is this 12-column layout that a lot of grids kind of force down your throat. So I want to show you something that we've been working on here at YUI. Which is this grid builder. We think that a grid should work to help you build the application that you want. And you shouldn't be trying to conform your application into a specific grid. So what we have here is a grid builder, and you can choose a bunch of properties here, and it automatically generates the CSS for you. So for example, I can take anywhere from a 12 column to a 24 column to a 36 column, whatever I want. You can choose a specific width, or you can have a fluid or fixed grid. So let's see if I can. You can choose whether you want to make it responsive or not, and the CSS here is actually going to be generated on the fly. So if I, let's say, have a 6-column grid, you'll see a lot less CSS. The other thing that we were working on is media query support. So instead of forcing specific media queries down your throat, right now there are these 4, but the goal is to add more media queries, and you can add or remove the ones that you're interested in. So let's just keep them in here for now to fix that little bug there. The other thing we were working on is responsiveness. So do you want your grid to be responsive or not responsive? And responsiveness for certain behaviors, the grid goes down to 100% collapsible columns under specific screen width. So if we take this now, take the CSS that's generated from this and put it into an example. So here's a simple page with the grid overlaid on top of it, so you can see what's going on. And it behaves just like a responsive site would. So you have images that you have images there. You have columns that go down to 100% widths, but we also have you can also keep grids on mobile devices. So if you have an iPhone and you want something to be a grid on a smaller screen size, you can do that. And we've also baked in some support that was lacking in original YUI CSS, which is stuff like margin support, offsets, gutters, etc. So just want to explain how this works. The whole concept behind this is one class name that we've added to the existing YUI grids, which is YUIG responsive. If you add a YUIG responsive instead of a YUIG, everything inside that automatically becomes responsive. So you can mix and match responsive behavior with unresponsive behavior, just like we have on this site. So here we have a YUIG responsive with a YUI3U 1/3, and that gives you a responsive. Sorry. Here we have a YUIG responsive with YUI 1/4, and that gives you the responsive behavior of an element that's 1/4 at higher screen resolutions, but at lower screen widths, it comes down to 100%. Whereas in this case, we have a simple YUIG, no responsive behavior, and that maintains sort of a grid even on smaller screen sizes. So this is something that I'm still kind of working on. One of the issues that I'd like some feedback on, actually, is what happens to grids between the phone resolution and the desktop resolution. In that tablet space, where I think there's an opportunity there to have grids that can offer some unique benefits. So for example, let's take a look at this 1/4 column again. And if you have thoughts about this, please come and talk to me, because this is still something that we're working on. On a tablet, you could imagine this becoming 2 columns and 2 columns, almost like a little grid, and then on a phone becoming one single column again. So that's something that we're working on, seeing how grids can behave on a tablet versus on a phone versus on a desktop. But the whole idea behind how we're approaching this is that instead of giving you one CSS file and saying, this is your responsive grid, as a lot of other people do, we're letting you generate different, we're letting you essentially customize your grid to how you see fit, and then based on that, we might take specific variations and put them on the CDN as standard CSS files, which we feel are the most common ones that people would need. This tool is actually out already. As you can see, you can view it on, it's on Heroku right now, and we might pull it into YUI library when it's a bit more fully baked, but I just wanted to give you guys a sneak peek at it. It's all written in JavaScript and Node, and it's actually using YUI Grids to generate YUI Grids. So yeah, that's all I had to show you today.
You first here, over here.
Hello.
Oh, sorry.
So I saw you generating a CSS. We typically used to generate a markup, and CSS typically stayed with the YUI. So I couldn't understand. Can you just go through the CSS which is getting generated?
Right. So the CSS that's getting generated actually is generated through handlebars. So the grid allows you to customize not only, as you saw, widths and columns, but also the prefix of the CSS itself. So instead of using YUI 3-G, if you could use YUI 3-row, and instead of using YUI 3-column, you could use Y-column. So everything is generated using handlebars. So that's how it's working under the hood. The variables are getting fed into a handlebars template that generates the CSS for you. That also actually reminds me, the grid is actually, in terms of file size, is actually pretty small, because what we say is, if you have responsive behavior, then you have media query support. And if you have media query support, then you probably have CSS3 support in the browser. So for everything inside the media query, we use CSS3 attribute selectors, which lets us essentially group a lot of CSS styles into a single rule. So the CSS that's generated is actually pretty small. I think for a 12-column grid, it's about maybe, I think it was 9 KB of CSS. I have to double check, but it was actually smaller than Bootstrap CSS from the Bootstrap grid CSS, from what I remember.
Yeah. So if you can build, if you can use the if you can use the grid builder on the Heroku app, couldn't you just generate CSS inside of a app that you're actively creating DOM nodes and things like that?
Totally, and in the Grid Builder app, you saw the yellow columns, and that's actually, the CSS is getting fed into that yellow column, that yellow sort of bar. So that's essentially what's happening in that app.
So how's the performance on that for like, if you're doing it inside of a whole bunch of views and things like that?
I haven't tested performance on that specifically, because I still think that grids are something that, it's probably something that most people will pull down from CDN. So I don't have specific performance metrics on that to show you today. Cool. No? Okay. Cool. Thanks.